Hi everyone, welcome to this session on the Integrated Management System, a practical guide and addressing the risks and opportunities. Every organisation has its own management system, which maps the elements of the organisation and how they interact, establishing policies, objectives and processes to support business goals. However, in today's increasingly complex ecosystems, management systems don't operate in isolation. Different entities in the same organisation might have different management systems, and organisations might also need to interact with the management systems of external service providers. An integrated management system, or IMS, offers a solution to create a holistic view. But what do we actually mean when we say IMS? My name's Claire Agata, and in this video session, I'm joined by two ISO experts who will explain more and introduce the new ISO practical guide to the integrated management system. So first of all, I'm going to ask our panel to introduce themselves. And Suzanne, I'll come to you first, please.
Thanks very much, Claire. My name is Suzanne Van Hove, and I am currently the chair of the JTCG, which is the Joint Technical Coordination Group on MSS. And this group is made out of the ISO experts within the various technical committees that own, write, and manage management system standards. And the goal of the JTCG is to ensure that management systems stay consistent, that they're efficient, that they meet the needs of the organization and the consumer. We provide advice to those who are writing or revising management systems. And it's from this group of experts that over 40 people, 40 experts, came together to write this new guide. So very happy to be here and very happy to talk about an integrated management system.
Fabulous. Thank you, Suzanne. And Frank, if you can introduce yourself as well, please.
Well, I'll try. My name is Frank Herdman. I'm a lawyer by trade. I have been a C-level manager with small and mid-sized companies for many years, and I'm a consultant now. I'm working as a so-called expert for DIN and have been delegated to ISO. I'm working with two technical committees in ISO, which is TC262 Risk Management and TC292 Security Management. And I'm a member of JTCG, and I'm one of those 40 people who have been trying very hard to update the IUMSS into the practical guide. Thank you.
Fabulous, thank you. So let's kick this off, and a good question to start is, why should an organization develop an integrated management system?
You know, that's a really good question. And this is one that comes to the JTCG a lot. Or we hear the talking amongst the users of a management system that they'll address one management system and then they see another one that would be useful for their organization and their consumers. And so they start to adopt and adapt those requirements. But a common practice is that they'll adopt and adapt in independent silos. And within the management system structure, we have a core set of requirements that every organizational management system would include. But when we adopt these management system standards in isolation, we actually duplicate. We become inefficient. We may use resources that aren't necessary. So if we take this photo here of 4 independent silos on a farm, each hold grain, and if we don't manage them, and if we have to manage them independently, think about the farmer. You know, what do they have to do to manage 4 huge silos of varying types of grain, making sure that they have the right components to them and that they utilize that grain at the right time? Well, through modern technology and maturity, the farmer today can now integrate those silos. And you can see that integrating structure here, where each of those 4 silos, actually 5 when you look in the middle, each of those structures are now managed at a centralized location. And it means that the farmer only has to do the things once to manage the grain, or manage that supply and demand for the grain in those silos. So that's what we want to do here, is we want to promote that you can integrate these management system standards to the organization, and it becomes much, much more efficient. And we're going to talk about that through the rest of this little production here. So hopefully this makes a little bit of sense. And that's why we want to have an integrated management system.
I think that makes perfect sense. And anybody who's worked in any type of organization understands the concept of silos. So, okay, so we know why we want to think about an integrated management system. Let's dig into the detail a bit more and have a look at what is an integrated management system.
Well, first of all, what is a management system? Management system is understood as the way in which organizations manage their interrelated parts, because the organization has different departments and all of them work in some way or another, and it needs to be organized. It needs to be in order. Otherwise, they don't align to each other, and they won't achieve objectives. And an integrated management system is a system which Susan just described. You have different departments, have different objectives, have different things to do, and this needs to be communicating with each other and needs to be integrated. And you can see on the right side a graphic which tries to explain some, not all, some of the parts that are important in an organization. You will have business continuity issues. You will have information security issues, security issues, and so on and so on. You name it. Energy management, quality management. And all of this needs to be coordinated. And you have, and these are only the issues that are governed by or explained by ISO standards. And there, these in the green area, these are the standards that are management system standards. And of course, you have some supporting standards. Related standards and requirements. You have ISO 37000, governance of organizations. You have 26,000, more and more important, social responsibility. And risk management, currently governed by 31,000. So, and of course, I nearly forgot, you have legal regulatory business requirements, which are not related to an ISO standard, but you still have to observe them, maybe even more so, because it's a legal requirement. So all of this integrated into your one holistic management system is should be an integrated management system. Thank you. So the history of the IMS, Integrated Management System. Originally, the business management department of the University of St. Gallen. You might ask, what's St. Gallen? St. Gallen is a little but very smart little city in Switzerland. And they have a university where the original idea of the integrated management system was developed. Only 50 years later, I'm sorry, ISO jumped on the bandwagon and said, "Oh, that's a really smart idea. We should think about how to do it with standards." And they developed the so-called high-level structure in the 2010. And this was then, ISO is always revising what it's doing after 5 years. So in 2018, the so-called high-level structure was evolving in a revision into the harmonized structure. And from there, they said, oh, and now we should give the people some idea how to integrate it. And they wrote a handbook, the IUMSS handbook. By now, there are 2 editions of the handbook. And this year or last year, it was again revised on the revision. And this is what Suzanne explained. We have the IMS, a practical guide, Integrated Management System, a practical guide, which will be published within the next fortnight or so, whatever. And this is what we are going to talk about today.
Brilliant, thank you. So a long history and potentially quite a complex picture for many organisations. So I'm sure a practical guide will be very welcome. Tell us more about the practical guide.
Okay. As I stated at the very beginning, the practical guide came about of a desire to make that integration activity a little bit more concise, a little bit easier to understand, and quite frankly, practical. So what our group of experts, again, over 40 different people, that all have experience and expertise in the integration of management systems, we came together and we said, okay, here is the structure of how we want to do. So it's a very easy to understand guide. There's only 5 chapters. The first chapter is just the basic introduction of introducing what's coming next. So this is what it looks like. Chapter 2, it says why and how, and basically why. Why do you want to address multiple management systems? And gives the background of what is necessary. Chapter 3 looks at, well, how do you go about, or what are the requirements that you need to do to integrate the various elements of an integrated management system, or the various management systems that you're looking at. Chapter 4 is then saying, once you have that integrated management system, what are the requirements then to operate, maintain, and improve? And those are you that are looking at this and saying, oh, this kind of sounds like a PDCA cycle, and you're not wrong. We just don't use that phrase very often anymore, but it is exactly that. It's saying, where are we? Where do we want to go? How do we get there? Did we get there? And, have we achieved what we wanted to do? And if we haven't, let's continue to cycle through it. The final chapter of the practical guide is small case studies. We were able to go out and engage various organizations around the globe, from the mega organization, the micro organization, and these all have integrated one or more management system standards into their organizational management system. And we feel that that gives us practical depth to what we're talking about and how we go about doing it. So when we look at addressing multiple management systems, again, a management system is the way an organization manages the interrelated parts of its business in order to achieve its objectives. Okay, so you can read that on the slide. But how do we do that? Well, typically an organization will have policies. They'll define its objectives, and they'll define processes that allow them to meet the objectives. But in the over 25 years that I've worked in the service industry, so I used to manage the work group within ISO that looked at service management. So the ISO IEC 20000 series. And as we looked at services, we've always stated that there has to be some level of governance. I'm just going to use the word governance, which is the appropriate word. Every organization is going to define its own governance. It's going to be based on their culture. It's going to be based on their risk tolerance. It's going to be based on how they want to operate. So a management system will always look at governance. They'll always look at how are they going to address risks and opportunities. And we have a section at the very end of this event here to talk about risks and opportunities. But different organizations will have different tolerances toward risk. We need to define what they are so people know how to operate, so they stay within those boundaries. We also have to address compliance. Now, this could be compliance internal or external to that organization. So we may have legal and regulatory requirements that have to be met depending on what our vertical is. We also may have internal compliance that we need to meet, or if we're going to be compliant to an international standard and get that recognition, we would have to be compliant to those requirements. We would develop processes that will allow us not only to achieve our objectives, but to make sure that we remain compliant to the various requirements, that we mitigate risk, and that we stay within that governing umbrella that the organization has defined. And then lastly, every management system will have some sort of evaluation and improvement activity. Is what we are doing the correct thing? Are we getting the outcomes that we want? Are we meeting the objectives? Can we do it better? Is it worth doing it better? Should we expend more resources to improve our processes and therefore improve our overall organizational management system? So all of these components, they're already in an organization in some form or function. Management system standards also address these components. And so when you adopt a management system standard, you're looking at a lot of things that are already happening in the organization, but now you're adding discipline-specific requirements, be it for services, quality, information security, occupational health and safety, energy, environment, et cetera, et cetera. There's over 50 management system standards today and currently. So when you address multiple management systems, this is a very high level methodology, I guess I should say. You have to understand your organization. You know, what is it that the organization is trying to do? Where do they want to stand? What are the internal and external requirements that they must achieve? Once they know what those are, they can say, here's the requirements that have to be met. So we would map them out. We would then expand those requirements to include those discipline-specific requirements. Again, if you're going to add, let me just say, environmental concerns, climate control, or safe wastewater, or air quality, all of those elements, we would expand the requirements that we have in our organization and say, this is what we will do to meet this specific requirement for this specific discipline. And then they'll integrate it into the overall management system. So then once we've done that, we need to identify and apply those tasks or those activities or those processes, whatever they might be, to address those new requirements. And guess what? The outcome of those 3 very simple steps, or 4 steps, is that integrated management system. Again, it looks very PDCA-like, does it not? Because once we have that integrated management system, we're going to go back and look to improve it. So again, looking to understand the organization. Have they changed since the last time that we looked at our management system? Have other things come about? Then underpinning all of this, and I just want to say this quickly because I never want to forget the soft side of change. So thinking about organizational change management, making sure that all of the individuals in the organization have the appropriate training, that we've engaged interested parties, that we share knowledge and experience, that we consider the human and cultural factors of change and also of the organization, so that we don't have a very narrow scope of our management system, but we have brought in as many of those elements as we possibly could.
Thank you, Suzanne. So looking at the broad nature of that scope and thinking about the integration specifically, how would we go about integrating the requirements of multiple management system standards?
Well, Claire, this I think is quite easy. It's explained in the practical guide, and it's only 3 steps. So I can be even quicker and briefer than Susan, reducing 4 to 3, which is prepare, connect, and integrate. And in the next 3 slides, we'll see what this means. Prepare the integration. On the right side, you'll see the figure which we had before. All the potential parts of an IMS. And there are more. Susan said there are 40 or 50 MSSs. And I mentioned there are related standards and there are legal requirements and so on. So there's a lot to consider. But if you start to integrate them, you have to lead the integration. And the key aspects are the benefit of the integration, the benefits and points of attention, and the scope of integration. And now you see in big letters, determine the scope of the integration. This is very important because if you try to integrate all 40 of the management system standards, you're dead. You're never going to make it. You need to decide which are the important issues for your organization, for your company. So not even those 12 standards which are in the green circle. You cannot do that, at least not at once. You start with maybe 2, maybe 3. And one of the principles of the standards of ISO is the principle of continual improvement. And this means regularly, probably once a year, you're assessing where you are and you are going to improve it. And whenever you are in this cycle with continual improvement, you can add another standard to your management system. But never ever try to do it all at once. You won't make it. And if you've determined the scope of the integration, you have to plan it. Determine the risk and opportunities of developing and implementing the integrated management system, and take into account, by all accounts, take into account the size and complexity of your organization. And I must add, it's not on the screen, but I might add the resources. Going from step 1, we are coming to step 2. You are connecting the requirements, designing the integrated management system, and here you are supported by the harmonized structure, which I mentioned before. You're structuring the requirements and you're mapping them. And there are many approaches for mapping the requirements. One of them, which is rather easy to handle, is the so-called matrix approach. And you'll see a very simple reference of the matrix approach on the right side. You have 4 sources of requirements: 22,301, business continuity, 28,000 security management, and XXX for another one, probably 9,001, which is quality management. And of course, never forget there are non-ISO requirements. And you have business processes, and you check out of the requirements of the various parts are met. And depending on how good you are, you'll either have a green field with a 0 in there because everything is already taken care of. You might have a red field with a 3 in there because you are not even close to meeting the requirements. You have a blue field with a 2, and you have a yellow field with a 1. And you do this for every process you have. And you can use a simple Excel file to map this, and then you have a result. Never forget human behavior and cultural factors. You have to involve the process owners in your organization and other internal parties, and you have to share knowledge. Risk assessment and treatment. You want to create and protect values. And you need to decide, and this is a big issue, the degree of formality you want to have. This is in particular an issue with in the context of risk management, and some people say, no, we don't want a formal risk management. That might be okay, but you need to decide this. Having done step 1, you come to step 2. You connect step 3. I'm sorry, go ahead. Thank you, Susan. You have to integrate the requirements. When you do so, you better check for any gaps, recognize and analyze gaps. You make a gap analysis. Sounds very important and formal, but you need to include the purpose of the gap analysis. Why are you doing this? The approach you have chosen for the gap analysis, and you have to have a summary of the results and recommendations. You can add additional details if you need them, if you want them, if they're appropriate. And if you find any gaps, the next step, you close the gaps. You have to evaluate your management system with a focus on the organization's processes and to determine whether a requirement is new or already in use. You have to determine whether any improvements are needed for missing elements and the actions required. And in the end, it's the same thing that Suzanne had before in another context. You verify the gap closure. You check whether everything's done. International, and you can do this by an internal or an external assessment, or by a management review, the top management itself, or by regular monitoring and reporting. Whatever you do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. So once we've completed those 3 steps, we've got the IMS in place. How do we then maintain and improve an integrated management system?
Well, as I sit here and I listen to Frank, and as we've worked with this system, it's funny, with my background in services and the long time in service management, I've come to a realization that service management is pretty cool. That it does cover such a broad range of operating a service, and quite frankly, an organization is a service to its consumers, and it's also a service to its staff. So as we've implemented this integrated management system, we're happy with it. The gaps are closed. Well, what we want to do now is to operate and maintain it. And that's what we would normally do as we deliver a service. We would monitor, measure, report, and potentially audit, either internal or external audit for second or third party audits for those of you who are international standard purists. But we would look at it. We would watch it. We would watch the staff engage with the various processes. So we would inquire, we would question, we would observe, and we would respond. Very Toyota kata kind of actions there. And then we would assess the alignment of the IMS. Does it still fit the needs of the organization? Does it meet the objectives of the organization? And then if we're saying, well, yeah, no, not really, or maybe we're over doing some things, well, we would want to review the use of resources, make sure that people are still up to date and they've been trained. And if we've had developments that have created some improvements or differences in the way that we work, we want to make sure everybody's up to speed on that. Looking at the outcomes of that inquiry and monitor and measure, optimize processes, make sure the documentation is all there, that we have the right reports going out, and that we've embedded those improved practices, and not just the practices themselves. Oh, I have to do this task, tick the box. Oh, here's another task, tick the box. We want the attitude. We want the corporate culture to embed into this integrated system, that everything has an impact to everything else in the organization. And as you can imagine, if we stay with that PDCA cycle, guess what? We do it again. And so we start the cycle again. Now, these activities aren't in any kind of specific order. Some of them are, some of them aren't. Some of them would be operating at the same time as other ones are happening. And I think people that are watching this would readily understand. And I think that's what makes it nice, is that we know the activities that need to happen. We just have to make sure that they do happen and the appropriate actions are taking place. And so when we start looking at that and we start wanting to say, how effective is our integrated management system? Well, again, that comes back to improvement. We have to understand what it is. We can look at the effectiveness of our IMS through maturity models, 1 to 5, 1 being the immature, 5 being the most mature. We can look at the various processes and grade them, saying, oh, gee whiz, this process here is only operating at maybe a 20% level. We'll give it a 2 on a maturity method, whatever it might be. We could use agile and lean principles in looking at our processes. Are they effective and efficient? We can use SWOT analysis to look at how our processes are interacting, internal and external to the organization. But the whole point of looking at the level of effectiveness, does it do what it's supposed to do? Well, what does it do for the organization? What does it do for the consumer? Well, for the organization, better interfaces for those shared processes. We become more efficient. Effective and efficiency, those are my 2 buzzwords since the beginning of time of when I got involved in standards. It's always about the effectiveness and the efficiency. We can benchmark ourselves to other organizations, and you're going to see that benchmark activity in a couple of the case studies that we have at the end of this, the practical guide. Showing progress and achievement will always lift up staff and engage the consumer, saying, wow, this organization is committed, and boy, are we good at what we do. It also can identify new opportunities or identify new risks that may have occurred, because that risk is never a stagnant thing. You just think about information security, and we have risks changing on a daily, hourly, maybe basis that we need to be aware of. And then eventually, it comes down to of monitoring the progress of that organization, and how do we make the statement to the board of directors, the owners, the consumers, of what we are doing and how well we do. So again, it's coming back to transparency, communication, efficiency, and effectiveness of what we've done in that integrated management system, where we work together as a unit rather than as independent silos.
So this all sounds amazing. The $1 million question, does it really work in day-to-day life?
Of course, the answer is yes. Come on, Claire. Oh, my goodness. This was one of the most interesting components of putting together this guide, was asking those 40 plus experts to give us live examples. And we got a lot of live examples. We tried to intersperse them throughout the guide. We put 1 or 2 of them in there, that would celebrate or note a specific aspect of when we were talking about the activities of integrating a management system, or why you would do it, or what if there are challenges. this guide does a pretty good job of telling you what's good and what's not good. And I think that's fair. I think you have to show both sides of the coin. So we did have case studies where we've been able to learn from experience. And I'm hoping that the readers of this guide will take these case studies and say, okay, if they've done it, why can't we? At the same time, learn from potential challenges that organization had and say, well, maybe we can overcome them or not do the same thing. So we have 5 major cases that we have looked at, and we'll go through each one of them very, very quickly. There's much more detail in the guide, but we've tried to choose a breadth and a depth of organizations, from a mega organization to a micro organization to various professional verticals. And the first one that we want to talk about is an organization that was an infrastructure construction and maintenance organization. And this organization was fairly mature, and they started out in their IMS. They included 3 management systems. And I'm not going to do the numbers because most folks won't know the numbers, but they'll understand the disciplines. So they had a quality, environmental, and occupational health and safety focus in their management system because of what they were doing. As time went on within this organization, they were operating very effectively and efficiently. They had their processes in place, but 2 additional MSSs were added. One was road traffic safety, and the second one was information security. And that was because of customer demand. And the customer demand, because they were starting to do construction and maintenance activities that incorporated additional clientele that were asking for more requirements. But because that the standards that they were using, the MSSs that they were using, they were all based on the harmonized structure, the common core of the management system. It was very easy to take the individual discipline-specific requirements, put them into their Excel spreadsheet and say, okay, here's the processes. These are the requirements. Have they been met? Have they not been met? What changes do we need to do? And then what do we need to do in terms of measurement? Because they did this, they were able to expand their business once again. The second organization is an international telecommunications organization. And because it is international, it is globally diverse. So multiple offices around the globe, which is the definition of globally diverse. They had 2 management system standards that they were using. One for quality and one for information security, which would make sense for a telecommunication organization. But they were finding that all their individual satellite organizations had their own processes, that they weren't integrated. And so from the corporate level, they started to integrate and then disperse those processes to the various satellites. So they had a common set of documentation. They had the common organizational processes, and they put them into that single source. We all know what a single source of failure is that, you can handle that one. If you have multiple definitions of something, you never know what you're doing, right? The challenge that this organization had, and this has been the challenge that has been common across the development of the Pratical guide, the outcome of an integrated management system, is that the external auditors, so the registered certification bodies, they may rarely will you see an RCB, registered certification body, have auditors that have been trained in the combination of these management systems. So looking at a combined audit, it does happen. It's rare. It's getting stronger. But all it takes is, at this point in time, it just took this organization an extra step to point the auditor for 9001 or 27001, saying, we have common practices and common processes. Here is the evidence needed to submit or to fulfill this requirement. But that has been the common challenge, is to have that overall integrated certification at the end. The next organization is a micro-organization. This is a 3-person organization, and they provide specialized technology to military systems. So their original IMS was focused on quality as well as occupational health and safety. And as they went through and continued to add those various requirements, because it was a customer request, and it was a request not only from the military systems, but then from other organizations coming in, because this was one part of a military system that was, of course, into a larger military system without giving away this organization. So what has happened, though, with a 3-person organization, they were able to have their integrated management system that addressed not only 9001, which is quality, but also occupational health and safety, to show that they were on top of safety concerns, which was a very big deal, and how they then were able to manage additional requirements and requests from their clientele. Being able to integrate both quality and occupational health and safety, again, got them new contracts. So an organization as small as 3 can do this. We have a global energy solutions organization. They have 4 management system standards. They were looking at quality, environment, anti-bribery, and information security. This is also an organization, now let's remember, it's Global Energy Solutions. This organization, if we go back and picture that original diagram where we had ISO standards outside of the MSS community coming into that integrated management system, this organization also took on ISO 31000, which is that risk requirements. And they've done that. And if you notice, if you remembered anti-bribery and risk, this was an organization that had to define their management system to stay true to the organizational governance and also address the differences in local customs, cultural factors, and laws. So this was a group that was using those management system standards to give guidance around fair practice, okay, for lack of a better term. And then the last one is a port authority. And this one is quite interesting. Again, 3 management system standards. They started off with quality. Then they added environment, which makes sense as you look at a port and you think of all of the environmental hazards that could be there. But then they added a management system standard around records. Think about the amount of stuff, and I apologize for using the word stuff, coming into a port and then having to know where it's held. Think about all these shipping containers, and they could be all over the place. They needed to have a better way. They needed to update their record keeping. And so they found, as they were adding these individual management systems, they added them one at a time. They started out with quality, then they went into environment, and then they decided to look at records management. They realized as they started their journey, they did it independently. And then they quickly realized, saying, oh my gosh, we already do this over here. Let's join together. And so they did that twice. They started out with 9001. They started working on environmental management separately, and then all of a sudden they realized we're already doing some of that stuff. Let's just add to that. And then so when records came around, they had a separate group looking at records, and then all of a sudden they quickly realized, saying these all relate. And so now they have a very efficient port, and that they're able to manage not only the quality of service that they're providing, but also address environmental concerns, and they know where everything is. So their records are completely and totally auditable and also accurate. So here's 5 quick examples of where management systems and an integrated management system have come together to create positive solutions for various organizations.
Brilliant, thank you. So one final question from me then. Is there any guidance on addressing the risks and opportunities that you mentioned earlier?
Well, Claire, of course there is. But there's no agreement on how you do it, because there are multiple guidance. Of course, every management system standards has a small part in it, which is chapter 6, which gives the impetus and says you have to address risk and opportunities, but it's not giving too much guidance. On the other hand, there is the very well-known ISO 31000 on risk management, which not everybody likes for various reasons. One of those reasons is that it's up to now only addressing risk faced by organizations. This makes it quite difficult for organizations that are acting in, for example, medical devices under the regime of public organizations governing them, to work with this standard, and therefore, and we want to mention this at the end of this little video. There will probably be a new standard, which is called ISO 31011, which will complement ISO 31000 and which will have a much broader understanding of risk. Risk faced by organizations, risk created by products, services, and people, and societal risk like climate change and human rights. And to handle this, there's the idea. No, you're too quick. Thank you. There's the idea of the so-called risk tree. At the bottom, you see meta definition of risk, effect of uncertainty, which is the current risk definition in the harmonized structure. This is a tree trunk, and from there you have branches. You have the management-related risk, which is the risk faced by organizations, which you'll find in ISO 31000 and some of the substandards of the family. There is the people, assets, product, services, or process-related risk. I call it risk caused by organizations, like the sub-definition of for ISO 45001, which is occupational health and safety, or others. And there is a rather young branch, which we call societal risk, society-related risk faced by society as a whole or relevant parts thereof. First and foremost, that is the climate change related risk. Secondly, there is the human rights related risk, and on all of those currently work is going on, and we are trying to find a framework for this on which gives the end user guidance on how to combine this. So this is a broader approach to risk and opportunities, together with the understanding that we need to find a way out of the glitch of different definitions of risk. So we created the risk tree to give more flexibility to standard writers and to end users, and we hope this will vastly help the organizations in the future. And now, Susan, I would like to have the next slide. Addressing risk and opportunities in ISO 31011 is risk and opportunities are treated as distinct and yet interconnected with dedicated processes. This is much closer to the way the man on the street understands risk and opportunities, because this is what, at least in wide parts of the globe, people talk about risk and opportunities. So there is a process for addressing risk, which is quite similar to the process or it's the same as the process in ISO 31000 in the future. It's identifying risk, analyzing risk, evaluating it, and then it's responding to the risk. Formerly, we were saying it's treating risk. Probably the new terminology will be responding to risk. And then there is a very similar, but a distinctly different process on addressing opportunities. It's again starting with identifying opportunities. And it's then analyzing opportunities. And it's, well, instead of evaluating, the experts say testing opportunities. And the end, it's like similar to risk assessment, responding to opportunities. But this is not where it ends, because we say it's very important. Well, if you only address risks or look at it in the terminology as a risk, and the risk can be positive or negative or both, it's very simple. But if you're talking about risk and opportunities with separate processes, you have to consider what do you do about the combined portfolio. And this is the third step. You take the results of those two processes, and you enter this and start the process of evaluating the risk and opportunities portfolio, with compiling the portfolio, analyzing it, and evaluating it. So this is a little more detailed as it has been up to now. And we hope that we will be able to develop this new standard quite quickly. But of course, quite quickly means it will take its time, like everything in ISO. But currently, you have the ability to go to ISO 31000, which is not everybody is happy with that for the reasons I mentioned. But in the future, you'll hopefully have also ISO 31011, which is applying the harmonized structure, by the way, and therefore very simply integrated into any integrated management system. So this is the idea. Look, we have something which is more detailed, which is more flexible than what there is up to now, and which is naturally integrated into an IMS. That's why we are showing this at this very early stage in this video. Thank you.
So thank you so much for that explanation, Frank. And thank you also, Suzanne and Frank, for sharing your expertise today. That's been a really enlightening session. Where can people learn more? Obviously, there is a practical guide coming soon, but if you have got any specific follow-up questions, or you would like to carry on the conversation with Suzanne and Frank, then they've very kindly shared their contact information here. So anything that you want to follow up on after today's session, then you can see the information to get in touch with them there. Suzanne, Frank, thank you again. Really great session. Really enjoyed hearing about the upcoming practical guide. So appreciate that. And thank you to everybody who's been watching. I hope you've enjoyed this session.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you for moderating.
Yes, Claire, thank you so very much. I really appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure.